Welcome to this week's Parsha Shir. It's a pleasure to be back, and it's Parshas Vayishlach. And this week's Shir is sponsored by Lillian and Aaron Fuchs and Jason Fuchs in memory of Lillian's brother and Jason's uncle, Jack Julius Glatter. Yaakov Yehuda ben Yitzchak, Zichron Livrocha's Yahrzeit, is on the 14th of Kislev. Parshas Vayishlach is a continuation, in a sense, of Parshas Vayetze, in that it continues with the story of Yaakov and his travails, his troubles, his problems. Next week, Vayeshev, that continues as well. But then we go to the story of Yosef. So Parshas Vayishlach begins with the fact that Yaakov Avinu is returning to Eretz Canaan. He's spent some time with Lavan. He's got married, 4 wives. He has now 12 children. And he's returning, and he's going to meet his brother Esau, who, as you know, from last week's parsha and the parsha before that, Esau had sworn to kill his brother because he felt he'd been done out of the brachos, of the blessings that he should have received from his father. That's what he felt. Of course, that wasn't the case at all, and that's a shir I've given on another occasion. You can search that one up. But now he's coming back, and he decides on various different tactics as part of an overall strategy that he's going to take in order to encounter his brother and make sure that he survives. And if not all of them surviving, at least part of the family will survive. But one of the things he does is he sends a whole bunch of gifts. He dispatches messengers. That's how the parsha begins. Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim. And in fact, Rashi says Malachim Mamish. They were real Malachim. Why they had to be real Malachim is also a shir for another time. But he dispatches these messengers, and they have a script that they have to read out almost, I guess learn by heart, and that they're going to be telling Esau when they meet up with him. And Esau is coming towards Yaakov Avinu with an entire battalion of warriors, of fearsome warriors, and that they know because that information has been conveyed to them. They have their trackers up front who have come back with this intelligence, and they know that Esau is accompanied by these fearsome warriors, and this is the message, or at least part of the message, that Yaakov Avinu conveys to his brother. And this is Yaakov telling the messengers, this is what you should tell, this is what you should tell to my master, to Esau. And already in that we can see that the tactic he's using is he's telling his brother, I consider you my superior, and therefore I'm inferior to you, I'm subservient to you. And that's already conveying a sign of, in a sense, weakness. I'm not here to beat you in battle. I'm here simply to come back to the country where I was born with my family, but you're in charge. This is what your servant, in fact the word Eved in biblical Hebrew doesn't mean servant, it means slave. This is what your slave Yaakov says. Im Lavan Garati, I lived with Lavan. You know Uncle Lavan? I've been living with him in Choran for the last few decades. Ve'echar ad ota, and it's taken me all this time to get here. And Rashi says, it's a very famous, well-known Rashi, it's often quoted, Garti begematria taryag. Garti is the same numerical value in Hebrew, because every letter in Hebrew has a numerical value. Garti is in fact interchangeable, it's the same letters. Garti is taryag, 613. We know from the Gemara in Makos, at the end of Makos, Dorash Rabbi Simloi, how many mitzvahs are there in the Torah? There are 613 mitzvahs. Koloima im Lavan harasha garti, I lived with the wicked Lavan. He was such a wicked man, a person who did every sin possible, every sin imaginable. But Taryag mitzvah shamarti, and nevertheless I observed 613 mitzvahs. So he is conveying a very important message to his brother, that I have been untainted and untarnished by my sojourn in Choran together with Uncle Lavan. I never learnt from his evil ways. So this is the message that he instructs the messengers, that Yaakov Avinu instructs the messengers to give to his brother Esau. Now, says the Mikdash Halevi, of course, this year we're focusing very much on the parish of my grandfather, Rabbi Rabbi Dunner, and his sefer Mikdash Halevi. Ilu Esau haya Adam tzaddik v'yirei shamayim. Now imagine Esau was a very righteous individual, somebody who'd never done anything wrong. He's a person who has a lot of yiras shamayim. He has a complete and utter respect and awe for Hashem. Behechlet hainu mavinim es ritzono shel Yaakov lahafkim ba'oznov es shmiras hamitzvos shaloi. We can perfectly then understand why it is that Yaakov Avinu would have wanted to convey, to let him know this information, that he had observed all these mitzvahs. Of course, Esau's a tzaddik. He's going to understand that even though Yaakov Avinu lived in the house of Lavan, nevertheless he kept all the mitzvahs. You see, you're a tzaddik, I'm a tzaddik, we're all still tzaddikim, but you know how hard it must have been for me to remain a tzaddik in the house of Lavan, because you know what it means to be a tzaddik, and therefore you're going to understand what Mesiras Nefesh, the incredible amount of effort I had to put into remaining at the standard and the level that I was before I left. Ulam, l'tzarenu, ha'uvdois yudois. The fact is, we all know, was Esau such a big tzaddik? He wasn't a tzaddik at all. Esau loy haya tzaddik tomim. He wasn't a tzaddik like Yaakov. V'af loy doime lekach. He wasn't even close to that. He wasn't even similar to being a tzaddik tomim. Hu haya rasha marusha. He was one of the most wicked men in all of human history. He's, at least in the way he's presented to us in the Torah, he's the paradigm of evil. He's a rasha. What difference is it going to make to him to hear that Yaakov Avinu observed Tariag mitzvahs in the house of Lavan? It's a wonder. It's absolutely flabbergasting. Why did Yaakov even bother trying to impress him with regard to his observance of the Torah and of mitzvahs that he had done in the house of Laban? What difference does it make? If somebody has no value in the thing that you value, by telling them how valuable it is and how much of it you have, you're not going to impress them, because they have no value in that. They don't perceive that value. As far as Esau was concerned, to know that Yaakov Avinu observed Tariq mitzvahs in Lavan's house would have no meaning whatsoever, no value, and he had no concept of the Mesiras Nefesh that was required, because as far as he was concerned, it doesn't matter at all. The Nira Loima says the Mikdash Halevi, in which case we have to try and explain it in a slightly different way. Yaakov choshash she'Esau yaskim lahashlim imay. So the thing is that this whole exercise of sending messengers to Esau was because Yaakov Avinu imagined that if he was successful, that if somehow the fraternal love would re-emerge between him and Esau, that it was because Esau is going to want to make peace with him completely, is going to want to be utterly at peace with his brother, and what's going to happen as a result of that? That from now on they're going to live together in close proximity to each other, next door. They're going to be next door neighbors. And in fact, we see that Esau suggested later, Nis'a b'nei lecha lenegdecha, lefichach. And we see that Esau, in fact, wanted somehow to have this level of reconciliation between him and his brother. Lefichach therefore itim Yaakov v'hidia. Yaakov foresaw this, understood that this might be an outcome of the reconciliation between him and Esau, and therefore he wanted to make sure that he jumped ahead of the wagon here, and that he was on top of the situation. And he sent the information to Esau. You know who I am? Do you know what I am, Esau? Let me tell you who I am. I lived in Lavan's house, and I still remain true to my ideals, true to what I always wanted to be and what I knew I should be. Despite the fact that I lived in Lavan's house, I'm still nothing like you. I'm not the Rasha that Lavan is. I'm not the Rasha that Esau is. I am still Yaakov. I'm the same Yaakov, the Ishtam Yoshev Aholim, and with belief shum psharos, without any level of compromise whatsoever. And therefore, shchenus me'in zeh eno psharos, in which case you're going to understand we can be friends, but we'll have to be friends apart, brothers apart. We can't be brothers together. And whatever peace will exist between the two of us, it will exist because we're not close to each other, but because we have distance between us. That's the first lesson that we can draw out of the message that Yaakov Avinu sent with the malachim that he dispatched to Esau in anticipation of meeting him for the first time in so many years. Here we have, it continues further. Now there's another bit of a problem here. In fact, my grandfather in his sefer in the Mikdash Halevi doesn't actually address this question directly, but what he's going to say now is going to answer this question as well. One of the questions that's come up over the years, and by the way, I once gave a whole share on this, and you can find it on my YouTube channel, or you can find it on the SoundCloud channel. I gave a whole share on the fact that Yaakov Avinu said, as Tariag mitzvah shamarti, I observe 613 mitzvahs. We all know it's not possible for anybody, even in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, to observe 613 mitzvahs. I'm not going to go into the details now of how that's the case, but certainly before the Torah was given, and if you don't live in Eretz Yisrael, and we know that Yaakov Avinu was living in Chutz La'aretz, he was living in Haran, it's not possible to keep 613 mitzvahs. And so the Mefarshim ask in different ways and address the problem in slightly different ways. But they ask the same question, which is, what does this medrash mean by comparing the word garti to taryag, by having this correlation between the number 613, which is the value of the word garti, and the number of mitzvahs that there are to observe in the Torah? What exactly did Yaakov Avinu keep that he was suggesting, at least in the words of the Medrash, that he observed 613 mitzvahs? So just keep that at the back of your mind, because this next piece in the Mikdash Halevi is going to answer that question as well. So Rashi said, Garti loina seisi sar v'choshuv eloger. So the word Garti, what does it mean? Garti means I lived, but I didn't live in any kind of permanent way. I was always an outsider. I was always a guest. Im lovon garti. I was an outsider, even though he was at home, and even though I became his son-in-law. Im lovon garti. It was always a kind of temporary situation. I was not made into a prince. I was not made into a ruler. I didn't become anything special. Im lovon garti. I was not a sar. I wasn't choshuv eloger. I was a ger. Einacha kedai. Lisnoi oisin. Therefore, it's not worthwhile for you to hate me. I'm not in the status that anybody should have any animosity towards me. I'm a nothing. I'm a no one. I am insignificant. Al brochos avicha, because you know that Father blessed me, and you think that the blessings conveyed to me some type of superhero status, that I'm going to come back and I'm going to lord it over you. I'm not Tsar, I'm not Choshuv, I'm nothing special. Shebercheni hu heve gvir la'achecha. You think that the fact is I was given a blessing that I should be a gvir, I should be somehow superior to my brother. I'm not superior in the slightest. I'm even less than I was when I left. I lived with Lovon for so many years, in Lovon Garti, and I remained a ger. I wasn't a sar. I never became choshuv, and therefore it's not worthwhile hating me because of the brachos that I got, because obviously they weren't makuyim. They never came about. Sharei lo niskayim abi. These brachos that I received from Father never actually came to anything, and here I am, Yaakov Avinu, a ger. Okay, that's the first message of Rashi. Dover acher, Garti b'gematria taryag. This we already mentioned in the first piece that we read from the Mikdash Halevi. We know that Garti is the same numerical value as taryag, 613. Klema im Lavan harosha Garti. I lived with Lavan the wicked, but taryag mitzvah shamarti. Nevertheless, I observed the taryag mitzvahs. V'lo lamadati mi masav haroim. I never learnt from his wicked ways. I stayed on top of my game as far as my Torah observance mitzvah observance is concerned. Now, what's going to happen here is my grandfather in the sefer segues into an examination of the actual verb that's used here. What is the word that Yaakov Avinu uses, or at least that Rashi, quoting the Medrash, uses with reference to Yaakov Avinu's mitzvah observance when he lived in the house of Lavan? If you look at Rashi's wording, what you're going to see, Navchin Yaakov shekiem estarik hamitzvos. It doesn't say that Yaakov Avinu that he fulfilled the mitzvahs, the 613 mitzvahs. Shomar es mitzvahs. The word we always use to translate the word shomar is to observe, to guard. But you're going to see that the word shomar means something slightly different. But we always talk about somebody being mitzvah observant, right? They observe mitzvahs. Look at the way my grandfather puts it in his sefer. How do we refer to people who does all the mitzvahs? What do we say about them? They are called shomer Torah or mitzvahs. We don't say that they are people who are mekayim Torah or mitzvahs. We say that they are shomer Torah mitzvahs. A shomer Torah mitzvahs is somebody we refer to in the modern form. In Yiddish, we say somebody is frum. What does that mean? He's a shomer Torah. He's a shomer mitzvahs. Shmiras ha-mitzvahs. We don't talk about kiyum ha-mitzvahs. It's not something that we ever use as the verb to refer to somebody who observes mitzvahs. It's not somebody, just an interesting point that the Mikdash Halevi raises as a result of the wording of Rashi, because what does it say? Im lovon garti, bestariag mitzvahs shomarti. Shomarti. Not garti, not kiyamti, shomarti. V'lo lamadati mimasav harom. I didn't learn from his bad ways. V'kan oleinu lodas. That's it. There's an important message here. In fact, it's a crucial message. And it's something which is so deep and so profound, and it's so important for us to take on board. What does it mean to be a shomer Torah mitzvahs? Ki mashmos hamusik shmiras Torah mitzvahs. What is the implication of the concept of shmiras Torah mitzvahs? Eino makbila lemashmos hamusik kiyum Torah mitzvahs. It's absolutely not the same. It's not parallel. It's not identical with the verb that you might have used of kiyum Torah mitzvahs. That's not the same thing at all. Shmira and kiyum are two different things. Kiyum HaTorah. What does kiyum HaTorah actually mean? I'll tell you what it means. It means hainu tzius lahor oiseha shel HaTorah. It means obedience to the instructions of the Torah. The Torah says, do this, do it in this particular way, and you do it. You're following orders. Geshem shelahavdil ezrochim mekayim eschukem midinasam. In the same way as any citizen of a country will keep the laws of that particular country. There's no investment in it. For example, I always use motoring analogies. You get to a red light and you stop. There's no investment in that law. You live in a country where there are traffic lights. You're driving a car and you're going to follow whatever the codes are, whatever the laws are with reference to driving your car on the road, on a public road, on a public highway. You're going to make sure you follow those rules. That's what kiyum mitzvahs would mean. L'umazois. But aside from that, putting that to the side, there's something more when it comes, the connotation of the concept of shmiras Torah mitzvahs is something else completely. We're going to see in Parshas Vayeshev that Yosef had a couple of dreams. And in those dreams, various things happened, and his brothers were very skeptical. In fact, it caused them to hate him. And the reaction of Yaakov is recorded with the following words: V'oviv shomar es hadovar. What does that mean? It can't mean guard. It can't mean observe. So Rashi explains, Perish Rashi, Shomar es hadovar hoyo mamtin u'mitzape masayovoi. Do you know what the word shomar means in that context? That Yaakov Avinu, who knew what the dreams, he understood, he was a dream interpreter, he understood what it meant. He was waiting and looking forward to the moment that these events would occur. That Yosef Avinu would be the great Yosef that was predicted in the dreams, where all the other brothers would pay tribute to him, as indeed was the case when it came to Parshas Vayigash. But at this moment in time, it hadn't happened yet. It was still only a prophecy that had emanated out of Yosef HaTzadik's dreams. V'oviv shomar es hadovar. That's what the word shomar means. It means mamtin u'metzape, waiting, eagerly, anticipating the moment when those things would occur, because he knew that they would. Koloma. Now we understand what the word shomer means in the context of mitzvahs. Shomer Torah mitzvahs? Hinu mishe mamtin u'metzape mosai tova mitzvah leyodai v'kaimena. Do you know what a shomer Torah mitzvahs means? It means somebody who's waiting and anticipating every single second of the day When can I do the next mitzvah? When will the opportunity arise for me to do a mitzvah? How can I go about my day in such a way that I could perform another mitzvah and another mitzvah and another mitzvah? Mamtin u'metzaper, that's what it means. V'kacho Yaakov Avinu Esau, and that's exactly what Yaakov Avinu did. K'fi she'amar le'Esau, and this is what he said to Esau. That's exactly the message he sent to Esau. Do you know who I am? Im lovan garti. Do you know what that means, Esau? It means Taryag mitzvah shamarti. I observed, I was shomer, Taryag mitzvahs, 613 mitzvahs. Of course I couldn't keep every single one of them because I lived before the Torah was given. And I lived in Choram, which is not in Eretz Yisrael, but it doesn't matter. There's still so many mitzvahs I can keep, and who knows what opportunity is going to come up. Taryag mitzvah shamarti was on the tip of my tongue. It was at the edge of my finger in every moment of every day. I want to keep a mitzvah. I want to keep another mitzvah. I want to keep as many mitzvahs as possible. I never learnt from the wicked ways of Lavan. I never became like my father-in-law. V'hainu himtanti v'tzipisi kol hayoim. I waited and anticipated all day, every day. Emosai tovai mitzvah liyodi v'akayim mitzvahs bar'ai. When will a mitzvah be available for me to do? When will the opportunity arise for me to do a mitzvah so that I can fulfill and carry out the commands of my Creator? We'll move on to the next piece in Mikdash Halevi. V'amartem gam hine avdecha Yaakov achreinu. The message that he told his malachim to give to Esau continued. He said as follows, say to him as follows, Gam hine avdecha Yaakov achreinu. Your servant Yaakov, your slave Yaakov is behind us. Ki omar. And he said, he reasoned, Achapra ponov b'mincha, if I apologize to you, Esau, with a gift, hahileches lefona, and the gift is, you're going to get it before we meet, before I even reach you, v'achrei chein ere ponov, and afterwards we'll see a face, ulai yisa ponai, maybe then when he sees me, Esau will see me, he's going to be nice to me. The idea being, I'm sending you a gift, you haven't seen me yet, but you see, I'm trying to appease you. I'm trying to apologize to you. Achapra ponov b'mincha, and through that, when you do see me, you're going to be softened. You're not going to be so angry with me because I'll already have paved the way for our reconciliation, of our relationship to be stronger and warmer. Im nispoinim beloshna achapra ponov, Shnei Pasuk says the Mikdash Halevi. If you look at the language of the Pasuk, this idea of achapra ponov b'mincha, nimtza ki tomun ba'emek rav. You're going to see, if we look at it a little bit better, we're going to see that there's great depth, there's great meaning to this phrase, achapra ponov b'mincha. Shekein borur, we can be absolutely certain. Shelo hoya al Yaakov lechaper al aval kilishuhu shenase klape Esau. Let's be perfectly frank. You can listen to the other shir when you want to. Yaakov Avinu had nothing really to apologize for. I know that he had hurt Esau's feelings and Esau was very upset, but it's not true that every time somebody's feelings are hurt that they're correct and that they are justified. And we know that Esau, in fact, wasn't justified. He'd forgotten, perhaps, what had happened originally, although he reminded himself of it after Yaakov got the brachas. He'd forgotten that he wasn't the one who was meant to be receiving the brachas. Do you know why? Because he sold his firstborn status to Yaakov many, many years earlier. Do you know, Yaakov Avinu took nothing from Esau that wasn't his in the first place. He didn't do anything bad to him. The fact is, he took what was rightfully his. The brachos that he got from his father, Yitzchak. The mirmos, you're going to say, you know what, he took them through trickery. You know why? It was the only way he was going to get them. And the only way he could receive them was by somehow circumventing the situation that has arisen as a result of Yitzchak aiming the brachos towards Esau instead of giving them to the person to whom they rightfully belonged, which was Yaakov. Magios hoyu loy al pi adin. The brachas were due to him according to the letter of the law. Sharei Esau machalois b'chayrosai mertzoinai hachofshi. Do you know what? Esau had sold his firstborn status to Yaakov Avinu, totally free will. He wasn't forced. He was hungry. He wanted a bit of lentil soup. And Yaakov Avinu said, give me the bechorah. And he said, sure, what do I need it for? I don't care about it. I don't want it. And he gave it to him. And they exchanged the bechorah for some lentil soup. And therefore the brachas were rightfully Yaakov's. We know that as the bechorah, it was perfectly within his rights for Yaakov Avinu to receive the brachas from Yitzchak and not Esau. Okay, so we know that he had nothing to apologize for. So the concept of a chapra ponav b'mincha seems to be hyperbolic at best. We need to understand what was it that Yaakov Avinu was trying to convey by using this phrase. V'nira sheYaakov yoda heitev she'ein kol sikui l'chayler shinu mehusi b'gishosei shel Esau klapov. You know what? Yaakov Avinu knew full well that there was absolutely no chance for him to generate any kind of change or meaningful change of attitude by Esau with regard to him. And we knew that Esau's not changing. Esau somehow is who he is, and his attitude towards Yaakov isn't really going to change. Fundamentally, it's not going to change. Yaakov Havin shehasikui hayochid sheyesh le. Yaakov understood that the only chance that he had, hinu ligroim leEsav lahamid ponim kabeyochel huayavoi. The only thing that he could achieve in this so-called confrontation that's about to happen was to get Esau to pretend that he liked him. That's the only chance he has. That somehow, some kind of temporary change, a superficial change, it's not permanent. That's what he could achieve. In this moment in time, Esau's going to say, I love you, and give you a hug, and that's what's going to happen. But to imagine that there's going to be a long-term change in Esau's attitude towards Yaakov, that was inconceivable. Ulam da yehei boy. Would be enough if that happened to all that Yaakov needed to achieve to save himself from the grave danger that was hovering over him and his family at that particular moment in time. So we see here that the goal was to create a temporary window of time when Esau would be on good terms with Yaakov, that there would be a peace of sorts between Esau and Yaakov. Lefichach, and therefore, my Yaakov. Achapra ponov b'mincha. How am I going to do that? Achapra ponov b'mincha. He said it to him straight out. He said to Esau, this particular moment in time, I'm going to send you gifts, and there's going to be an exchange here where it's a bit of a one-way street. I'm going to give you a lot of stuff. I'm going to make you feel really, really good right now. What does the word achapra mean? Achapra, we said, means apologize, appeasement, somehow creating a total change of relations. But you know the Hebrew language is so elastic, and you can use a word and change its meaning through drush, but sometimes even in pshat. What does the word achapra mean? Hinu miloshoin kaperes. What does the word kaperes mean in Hebrew? It means a cover, a lid. Haloi hi mechase. It covers up something. Kashem shakaperes eino mechoileles shinu mehusi bechefet shagabav imunachas. We know that when you put a cover on a pot, it doesn't change anything about the pot. It just means that there's a cover on top of whatever is inside the pot, right? That's what it means. Kach lo tzipo Yaakov sheminchasei techoilel shinui shel mamish begishosei shel Esau. He knew that what he's doing now by creating this situation, achapra ponov b'mincha, I'm covering up the situation by giving you gifts, by making you feel good, by creating a sense of friendship between us at this particular moment in time. We're creating a bit of a mirage of positive relations. Tafkidah shel ha-mincha. What was the purpose of the gift? Lo haya ela lechassos es rigshosov amitiyim shel harasha. The purpose of it was only, and don't think that Esau was stupid, he understood it. It was only to cover up the true feelings that lay at the heart, at the very core of who Esau was towards Yaakov. And it was just to convince him temporarily to cover up, to put a disguise on his face, to cover up, to obscure what was really going on inside, what he truly felt towards his brother Yaakov. We see that this intent, this goal of Yaakov Avinu was utterly successful. Shari nema b'posuk, it says in the pasuk says when they finally met, how does it describe that meeting? Vayorotz Esau likrosei, Esau ran towards Yaakov. Vayichabekehu, vayipal al tzavorei, he kissed him and he fell on his neck, he hugged him. Vayishokehu, and he kissed him. Vayivku, and he cried. V'kosav Rashi, vayishokehu. Says Rashi, do you know what the word vayishokehu means? Nilkud olov, there's dots on the word vayishokehu. It's always a bit of a code. Whenever you have dots on a word in the Torah, when the official text of the Torah insists that dots are placed over the letters, loy masha loy nashku b'chol liboy. Says Rashi, that means that when he kissed him, he didn't kiss him with all his heart. He didn't mean it, really, really mean it. At that moment in time, that's what he did. Amar Rav Shimon ben Yochai. Rav Shimon ben Yochai adds as follows. Halacha hi beyodua is a well-known fact. Here he's speaking about the individuals, but he's also talking about generally the relationship between Esau and Yaakov, between those who are of the family or the disposition of Esau, and Yaakov, and those who are the descendants of Yaakov, who are true to Yaakov's legacy. Halachahu. Halachahi. It is a law. It is immutable. B'yodua, and it's well known. Esau soina liYaakov. Esau and Esau's hate Yaakov and Yaakov's. There can be no reconciliation between the two. They are polar opposites. They repel each other. They cannot come together as one. Esau soina liYaakov. So what happened at that moment in time, says Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, he was overcome with emotion at that particular moment in time. In that moment in time, it was fleeting. He kissed him with all his heart. And from this we know for certain. It's absolutely explicit. The only thing that Yaakov intended to achieve, and in fact that's what he achieved, was to create this superficial, external situation of love and affection and relationship between him and Esau. Even if it wasn't with a full heart and it wasn't totally heartfelt. And even according to the opinion, and we saw Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, who says he did kiss him at that moment in time with all his heart. It was certainly not, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, it was that moment in time, it was ba'isa shah. It wasn't something that was going to be retained, it wasn't going to remain. It wasn't permanent. Ela Peretz Regoi was at the spur of the moment, v'choylef, and it was in passing. Hatzlachosei shel Yaakov b'nisyoinoi lashpia al Esau. The success that Yaakov had in his attempt to have an influence on Esau, it wasn't total, it wasn't complete, it wasn't permanent, it wasn't sustainable. Ulam Yaakov yoda heitev ki zeh ha'maksimum ha'efshari. He knew that this was the absolute maximum that was possible for him to achieve. Ulefichach loy sha'af liyosa mikach, and that's why he didn't strive to do any more. And that's what it means when it says in the pasuk achapra Ponov Bamincha, that it's a kapoires, it's a cover, it's a mirage, it's a disguise. It's nothing more than that. At that moment in time, that's all that was needed, and that's what he managed to achieve. And one more piece from the Mikdash Halevi, a beautiful piece. Vayokom balaylahu, vayikach et shtei noshav et shtei shivchosav es achad osa yelodov, vayavar es ma'ariyabik. And he took at that particular moment in time his two wives and his two concubines, and the 11 children he'd already had. He hadn't had yet Binyamin, although you're going to see in a minute there were 12 children. Vayavar es Mavar Yabok, and he traversed Mavar Yabok, which was a brook that separated him from the other side, which was where Eretz Canaan was. Well, Pirish Rashi, and Rashi explains, there's Achad Osi Yelodov, his 12 children. It doesn't say Bonov, it says Achad Osi Yelodov, his 12 children. But Dina Heichon Hoisa, there was a 12th child. Who was the 12th child? A daughter called Dina. We know that she existed. Where was she? Why doesn't it say V'shteimasar Yelodov? Nasna b'teva b'nal b'fanel. Do you know what he did to her? He hid her in a box. Shelo yitain ba Esau einav, so that Esau wouldn't see her. V'lokach nenash Yaakov. And you know what? Yaakov Avinu was punished for this. Shemon ame echov, shema tachzirenu lemutav, v'nofla b'yad Shechem. He prevented her from seeing his brother, and maybe she would have been successful in turning him away from his bad ways. She would have turned him from a Rasha into a tzaddik, and therefore, as a result of him preventing that from potentially happening, from Esau marrying his niece Dinah, do you know what happened? She was taken by Shechem, and that whole story happened. Unbelievable, isn't it? What an unbelievable thing to say. That the reason that Shechem happened was Yaakov's fault, because Yaakov should have allowed Esau to see Dinah, and then Dinah might have married Esau, and then Esau would have become a good person. Really? Does that make any sense to you? Does it make any sense at all? That's what the Mikdash Halevi is going to address. Divrei Rashi, hamuvusosim al divrei hamedrash kan. Rashi's pshat, which is of course based on a chazal, lich'oira tu'unim biyah. We really need to go into them in greater detail. We need to understand what Rashi is trying to teach us. Haloi bavadai, ein ish matel sofik bekach sheyitzchok v'rivcha tzadikim. No one could be in any doubt that Yitzchok and Rivka, maybe it's the most righteous people of all time, right? Yitzchok, the son of Avraham Avinu, and Rivka, his wife, two fantastic people. Asu kol she'al yodam b'chtei lechanech es benom Esau. Don't you imagine that they did everything that they could to educate, to improve the behavior of their son Esau? Can you imagine they did anything different? Do you think they approved of him? No, of course not. They had tremendous agmas nefesh from his behavior. They did everything that they could to make sure that he was a much better person than he became. Ulashiva lemutav, and return him when he went off in the wrong direction, to return him back to the correct path. Ish af einoi matil sofik b'toitzo'o hasofis. But nobody's in any doubt of the ultimate outcome of the situation. Muvukosham loy ola b'yodam. That which they sought, in other words, trying to improve him, to make him a better person, it didn't happen. Ve'esav lo shino midarka hara ki hu zeh. We know that Esau never changed his ways. He never became a good person. It never happened. Rivka, Yitzchok put all the effort and the energy into making their son a better person, but it didn't happen. In Cain. Now, if that's the case, that Yitzchok and Rivka were unsuccessful, how strange. How would we even come into our heads that Dinah, who is the granddaughter of Yitzchok and Rivka, I mean, a younger generation, right? She's the next generation down after Esau. How would we even think, how would we think that she would be successful in doing something that they had failed at? Why would it even occur to us, or to the Medrash, I should say, that she would be successful in returning Esau to the correct path? Do you know what she was? She was a young girl. So what's going on here? Why is Yaakov being penalized? Why is somehow he's being criticized for the fact that he didn't allow Dinah to come into proximity to Esau, because Esau might have taken her? Because you know what? Esau might have become a better person as a result. Really? Is that what's going on in our minds? If Yitzchak and Rivka weren't successful, of course Yaakov wasn't successful, no one was successful, everybody had failed, but Dinah, she's the one that's going to change the situation. Really? Sounds completely and utterly ridiculous. Says the Mikdash Halevi, Hatshuvahi, do you know what the answer is? Anything that is with regard to a lost soul, and perhaps this medrash is fanciful, that seems to be the undercurrent here. The medrash is fanciful, it's hyperbolic. But it wants to convey to us a very important message. When we're talking about lost souls, Asur la'abed tikva b'shum oifen. You can never, ever lose hope, even the slimmest of chances. Even some minor opportunity that might exist that could turn things around and get that lost soul back to where it needs to be, you could invest all your hope into it. Despite the fact that Yitzchak and Rivka were completely unsuccessful in all their attempts to educate Esau, they had no success whatsoever. Nevertheless, Yaakov Avinu, at least according to the Medrash, and perhaps it's fanciful, hyperbolic, exaggerated, but Yaakov Avinu should have given Esau a chance. He should have at least given Esau the chance, the opportunity to improve, even to the extent, sounds like from the Medrash, to use his daughter as bait. It sounds almost ridiculous, but the Medrash wants to convey an important Musar point. It's not about Yaakov per se, of course it is. It's about the investment that you need to make in a lost soul and how important it is. Well, Hamin was for Yaakov Avinu to believe, to have faith. That even young Dinah, she has a chance. She has an opportunity. She might just be able, through her charm, through the way she interacted with Esau, to bring him back on board. Wouldn't have that been amazing? That's what the Medrash wants to teach us. He should have made this extra effort. And seeing as he didn't do that, he didn't make that extra effort, nitba al kach v'nenash b'chumra. He's held responsible for it. He was punished for it. That's what the Medrash wants to say. Continues the Mikdash Halevi. Hamasar chinuchi hanegeh aleinu. Do you know what the takeaway is here? What's the educational takeaway? It's chadu boror, it's singular, it's clear. There are times when we're ready to give up. We've got a kid, a member of our family, somebody, and they're just not doing the right thing. And we're ready to be misyayish. We're ready to completely give up. Lahorim yodayim bechinuchai, to wash our hands from his chinuch, shel yeled zeh o acher, from this kid or that kid or whatever it is. We've decided it's just not worth it. Why are we wasting our time? Ulam mi parsha zu onoloimdim. Do you know what we learn from this episode? Ki ein hatzdaka letzaid me'ein zeh b'shum oifen. There is absolutely no, this is just not the right way. This is not the right approach. This is not the correct path when it comes to chinuch, to ever give up on somebody. Tiyena nesivos asher tiyena, whatever the challenges may be, whatever the outcome may be, whatever the ultimate result is, we have to make the effort. We have to be willing to take even the remotest chance that the thing that we're going to do is going to turn it all around. Even if we're talking about somebody who we could say, he's a Rasha. He's like Esau. He's wicked. There's no salvation here. No. even after we've exhausted all what we think are the available options with regard to bringing that person back, there's still more things we can do. It's another day, it's a week later, it's a month later, it's a year later. Try again. Keep on trying. Never give up. There's still a chance. You might just make a breakthrough. You didn't try this particular method. You didn't try and introduce him to that particular person. You never sent him this book or introduced him to some concept, or her, of course, to change things round. Ki tomid yesh sikui, says the Mikdash Halevi. Don't ever imagine that there's no solutions. Don't ever imagine that the outcome is a foregone conclusion. There's no such thing. When it comes to chinuch, when it comes to education, there's no such thing as sufficient effort. You can never say, I've done enough. You can never do enough. We have to put in the maximum level of effort when it comes to chinuch. And if it didn't work today or this week or this year, next year's another year. It's another opportunity. It's a new teacher. It's a new, whatever it is. The circumstances have been slightly changed. The pieces on the chessboard are not quite the same. And now another opportunity exists. Pounce on it. Use it. And maybe that's the thing that's going to change everything. She'ein lo gvul b'shir. Chinuch has no boundary, and there is no shear, there's no measure to what can be achieved when it comes to changing things round for your child, for your son, for your daughter, for your brother, for your sister, for whoever it is in the community that you come into contact with. That is the lesson from the Medrash about dinar hidden in the box. We will leave it here for today. Thank you so much. Thank you.